How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling by Frank Bettker, Chapter 11. The most important word I have found in selling has only 3 letters. The most powerful word in the English language, I believe, is the little word why. But it took me years of stupid stumbling to find it out. Before I learned the importance of this little one-word question, whenever a man offered an objection, I immediately argued the point with him. It wasn't until one day, when a friend of mine telephoned me and invited me to have lunch with him, and that I really appreciated the power of his miracle-performing word. My friend's name is James C. Walker, president and principal owner of Gibson Walker Lumber Company, F in Luzerne Streets, Philadelphia. After we ordered lunch, Jim said, "Frank, I'll tell you why I wanted to see you. Recently, I went down to Skyland, Virginia, on a stag party with a group of friends. We had a great time. We all slept on cots at night in a large one-room cabin. Well, you know what happened the first night. Instead of going right to sleep, we started talking back and forth. One by one, they fell asleep until finally, I was the only one left talking. Every time I stopped talking, the fellow next to me would say, 'Why, Jim? Why?' And like a fool, I would go on and go into more detail until he snored. Then I realized he had been trying to see how long I could talk. We both let out a big laugh. Right there," Jim went on, "it suddenly occurred to me that here was the way I bought my first life insurance. I didn't know whether you realized what you were doing, Frank, but the first time you called on me, I told you that I was going to tell you the same thing I told every other insurance salesman who came to see me. I don't believe in life insurance. Instead of launching into a long argument like other salesmen did, you merely asked, 'Why?' As I explained why, you encouraged me to keep on repeating. 'Why, Mr. Walker?' The more I talked, the more I realized that I was on the wrong side of the argument. Finally, I convinced myself that I was wrong. You didn't sell me, I sold myself. But I never knew just how it happened until the night I talked too much down at Skyland. Now, Frank, the point of the story is this. Since I got back, I've sat in my office and sold more lumber right over the telephone than I ever sold before just by asking why. So I wanted to let you know, in case you didn't already know, how you sold me my first policy." Jim Walker is one of Philadelphia's most successful lumbermen and a busy man. I have always been grateful to him for taking me aside to make me realize, as I never did before, the power of this little word, why. I am amazed that many salesmen are afraid to use it. I told this story in our lecture courses a few years ago and had salesmen and others in various fields of activity all over the country tell me how they started using why the next day and how it helped them. Let's just take one example. In Tampa, Florida, a machinery sales agent got up in our school one night and said, "When I heard Mr. Bettker talk about why last night, I thought I'd be afraid to use it. But this morning a man walked into our place and priced a large machine. I told him it was $27,000. He said, 'That's too much money for me.' I said, 'Why?' 'Because,' he said, 'it would never pay for itself.' 'Why?' I asked. "Well, do you think it would?" he asked frankly. "Why not? It's been a wonderful investment for everyone who has bought them," I replied. "I couldn't afford it," he said. "Why?" I asked. Each time he offered an objection, I asked him why. Then he elaborated on his reasons. I let him talk. He talked enough to find out that his reasons did not add up right, so he bought that machine. It was one of the quickest sales I ever made. But I know I wouldn't have made it if I'd given him my usual long, drawn-out sales talk. Listen to this. The late Milton S. Hershey, who used to push a candy pushcart around the streets and later made millions out of chocolate bars, thought why was so important that he dedicated his life to it. It sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Well, here's how it happened. Milton S. Hershey had 3 failures before he was 40. Why? He asked himself, why is it that other men succeed and I fail? Putting himself through a long quiz, he narrowed the answer down to one reason. I was going ahead without having all the facts. From that day until his death at 88, his whole life was dedicated to the philosophy of asking why. If someone said to him, "It can't be done, Mr. Hershey," he'd say, "Why? Why not?" And he kept on asking why until he had all the reasons. Then he'd say, "Now one of us has got to go get the answer." Well, isn't that exactly what J. Elliott Hall of New York discovered was wrong with him in selling? He'd been trying to go ahead without having all the facts. That's part of the big lesson I learned from him. In the next chapter, I have used 2 actual interviews to illustrate how why helps me get to the facts. Also, I show how I use why in connection with another common little phrase that produces such surprising results.